I'd always believed that the Catholic Church conflicted with my patriotism because I always believed that, like, thou shalt not kill, so you can't be in a war.
I always heard about just wars in the Catholic Church. What does that really mean, a just war? To me, a just cause would be if people were in danger or were being oppressed by a tyrant or were in a terrible situation, and the war was the only way that we could, or anyone could, help to get them out of that situation.
Sometimes there are specific reasons that we go into for human rights and other reasons that we need to protect the people because we have the power that can help them.
I can't imagine myself going to war. It's just killing someone is not something I could really do. My uncle is currently serving in Afghanistan, and every week and every day, like, my family and my aunt are always praying for him and just hope he can return safely.
I'm currently applying to be in the Naval ROTC program for the Naval Nursing Corps, so that's kind of my way of showing my patriotism. I've always wanted to be a nurse, and I think it's a great way to serve my country. It's very honorable and like an admirable thing in our country to be serving.
I feel like many of the wars today are started over something that could be prevented. Any more diplomacy throughout the countries and, like, not getting angry and greedy with resources and land.
There are criteria that the church has for whether or not it is permissible to go into a war, and then for the behavior once you're in war. But in order for a war to be justified, there has to be a few things that need to be taking place. The first one is it has to be declared by legitimate authorities, somebody within the society who is responsible for the common good. So for us in the United States, that would be the President of the United States, along with the Congress. The other thing is that it has to be as a result of an unjust aggressor committing an unjust aggression, something that is grave and also persistent. It's basically a consistent injustice being perpetuated on a country or a society. So for instance, something like a foreign nation invades your territory and plans on taking that territory over. It also has to be a last resort, which means basically that you have to have exhausted all other possibilities for achieving a peaceful end to the situation, to the injustice that's being caused. So you might do that through diplomacy. Obviously is a major force for keeping us out of wars. You can also do it through other non-violent means, embargoes and things like that. There also has to be a prospect for success. You have to have a legitimate reason to believe that you will be successful in the war, that you're not just going to go in with a terrible loss of human life, destruction of property and persons, societies and livelihoods, without having a pretty good idea that you will succeed in the endeavor. Finally, the idea of proportionality, that the war always causes a great deal of devastation and harm. There's no way around that. So you have to see that the injustice is greater than the harm that will be caused by going into war.
We may have heard about the just war theory, but can war in any way truly be justified?
As Catholics and patriotic citizens, are we at conflict with our faith if we decide to serve in the military?
And how does the Fifth Commandment come into play when one nation must defend itself from an invading army and killing seems inevitable?
War versus the Fifth Commandment. That's what we'll be talking about today. Hi everyone, I'm Nick.
And I'm Ella, and this is Real Faith TV.
First, we'd like to thank Our Lady of Good Counsel Youth Group from Moorestown, New Jersey for helping open today's show.
And for sharing some of their views on war and how it is affected by our Catholic faith.
We'll also meet Ron, another OLGC youth group member, who is a wild card guest today.
You've also already heard from our spotlight guest, Father Alberto Tamayo, explaining the just war theory at the top of our show. Father Tamayo is the pastor of St. Anthony of Padua Church in Red Bank, New Jersey.
We'll hear from him more in a few minutes, but first, let's meet our studio guests.
Okay, they are Sean,
Becca,
Leanie,
Allie,
Mike,
and Jess. So, have you guys been impacted personally by war, or can a war be just, truly?
Well, as far as a war being just, I think that, like Father said, if there's oppression going on or if there's something that needs to be stopped and diplomacy hasn't worked, then I think there can be a just war.
I think war becomes unjust when you're the person or the group of people who are instigating a fight where one is not necessary.
Yeah, so like a preemptive strike, sort of. When you're no longer going in to help someone and you are now the aggressor, that's when you know you've done something wrong.
I don't know. I'm just very against war. I'm such a hippie, oh my gosh. But no, I don't believe in killing at all. And it really bothers me when people just don't have respect for human life and they say, oh, well, you know, casualties happen in war, it's just what happens. It's like, yeah, but did the war have to happen? Like, I'm very uneasy with the whole thing.
I think that's a good point to consider, that it affects people's lives. Like my cousin, when he came back from war in Afghanistan, he was just so like hurt inside that he wasn't like mentally stable. So he's been living in a psychiatric hospital because of what he witnessed and experienced in war.
It's terrible. No generation is immune from the violence and devastation of war.
While we may not experience the effects of war directly, there's no question that war is often portrayed in these situations as noble and patriotic.
And we have an entertainment culture that glorifies the shocking brutality of war through special effects in movies, television shows, and the all-too-realistic video games.
In fact, war-themed first-person shooter games have advanced to where Lieutenant Colonel Dave Grossman, a prominent West Point psychology professor and retired Army Ranger, has labeled them as murder simulators.
But have we ever stopped to think about what our faith teaches about war?
Let's hear what our wildcard guest Ron, a member of Our Lady of Good Counsel youth group in Moorestown, New Jersey, has to say about this.
Basically, our church teaches that war should be a last resort. We really should not be engaged. We should try to achieve peace by all other methods before we decide to enter into any sort of conflict.
The Catholic Church does not say that war is never acceptable. However, there are very specific circumstances that determine when it is.
St. Augustine of Hippo was the first Christian thinker on just war. He listed parameters for what is and what is not acceptable during war.
Proportionality, or only using as much force as is necessary.
Discrimination, being able to distinguish between combatants and non-combatants, and not attacking civilians or innocent people.
And responsibility, that we are not responsible for unintended side effects if they happen by accident, and if some good still comes out of it.
This is not the same thing as just saying the end justifies the means and deliberately doing something wrong for the purpose of a good outcome.
So do these parameters mean that God is okay with the idea of war?
Next, Father Al tackles this difficult question and shares with us how in some rare cases, war can be viewed as permissible or allowable.
Let's check him out.
The question of whether or not God is okay with particular wars or not it's a very difficult question to answer. Throughout Scripture, we see instances where it does seem that God is okay with people defending themselves against injustices and things like that. And the church tradition has taught us that Christianity has never been really a completely pacifist religion, in the sense that we've always had this idea that it is okay to defend yourself or to defend your society or your countries. Do I think that God is okay with killing and the destruction that happens, the destruction of His creation and all that? No, I think man's sinfulness, which causes these wars to happen, is a horror to God. But do I think that it is permissible for those who love God, who honor God, to engage in a war for a legitimate purpose, using legitimate means? I would have to say that Scripture and tradition say yes, that it is sometimes permissible. There still are obligations once you get into that war, obligations that you have towards morality, towards God. And those obligations would be things like non-combatant immunity, the fact that innocent life must always be protected to the best of our ability. So you can't indiscriminately go in and kind of smash the whole place to pieces. You have to be able to hold back and use only the means necessary to achieve the end, which is the cessation of injustice and violence being committed.
I don't know, the whole part about responsibility, we don't take responsibility for when things happen on accident, that doesn't seem right to me. Like, it's like we made it happen, we should be...
It's hard for us to determine like that. And what Father was saying, how can a war be just? We're not God, we don't always know the answer.
Right.
But
what kind of unjust actions do you see happening today in war, and how does our faith help us through these times?
I personally feel with the atomic bomb that was dropped in Japan, it wasn't necessary for us to take those extreme measures because we could have taken other precautions to make peace between us. And we just didn't do that. And I think that kind of warfare is not acceptable at all.
Right. It's like our faith tells us that, Jesus says, choose life whenever possible. Was that choosing life? It's all about life. Life is about love. Love is about God.
The thing that bothers me so much about Japan is that it wasn't attacking military.
Right.
It was attacking regular people. They might not have even known what was going on over in America, and we just wiped out cities of people. Their shadows are burned into the ground. Like, that is so disturbing to me.
And it killed all the land and stuff. Like, they can't farm on it or anything because of all the radiation that's still there.
Well, in any type of atomic or nuclear warfare, they're actually called cruel bombs because not only are they absolutely devastating, because one bomb could level an entire city, it destroys anyone who's nearby. They receive radiation and all the complications that come with that. It destroys the land. Any livestock or any water that was there is completely useless. It's a really horrible thing.
And the saddest part is that we haven't even learned anything from it. Like, we're still going further than we need to.
Yeah.
Like, there's a set of rules that, not even related to faith, but that they have to follow. The military, it's called the Geneva Code. And we're not following it. That goes against what we believe it's not proportional. That was the first rule that we talked about. So it's
I feel like the value of life in today's society is really underestimated. And I know we mentioned before about all these video games that are coming out. So this young generation, I feel just takes life for granted because it's oh, I died, respawn, let's do this again. Yeah. And I don't think they realize that this actually happens in real life and you can't respawn. You can't come back,
When you look at Jesus' message, he was all about peace and love. And I know in the modern adaptation of Jesus Christ Superstar, the tension was building when he entered Jerusalem. Everyone's arming up and they're getting guns and stuff. And an apostle hands Jesus a gun, we have to defend ourselves. And Jesus just looks at him are you crazy? I'm about peace and love. Why are you giving me a gun? That's so not me.
Weapons of mass destruction in the form of chemical, biological, and nuclear arms are perhaps the greatest threat to our civilization.
We must understand that both their production and their use is strongly condemned by the Church.
In its document Gaudium et Spes, the Second Vatican Council declared that every act of war directed to the indiscriminate destruction of whole cities or vast areas with their inhabitants is a crime against God and man,
which merits firm and equivocal condemnation.
Let's go back to our wildcard guest, Ron, where he discusses the inherent evil of weapons of mass destruction.
The real problem with nuclear weapons is that a lot of damage can be done in a relatively short amount of time, and there's really no way to mediate the impact of such weapons. The problem is, essentially, that if we could kill 10 million people in one go, then can we really justify a war in which something like this could happen? Is there really any potential gain that could justify the loss of 10, 20, 30 million lives?
To understand the Church's position on war, we must first understand the fifth commandment, thou shalt not kill.
Sometimes it comes down to why the soldier is fighting in the war.
Has this war been declared for a good reason?
Is a soldier fighting in order to defend his or her country from a legitimate threat?
While the fifth commandment forbids murder, it does allow for the legitimate use of self-defense.
But it must be the absolute last resort.
Let's go back to Father Tamayo. where he discusses the fifth commandment more in depth and how it is in line with the church's idea of just war.
When talking about the commandment, thou shalt not kill, there is more meaning behind that commandment than simply thou shalt not kill any life at any time, in any place, for any reason. In fact, we see that from the Old Testament. Moses himself, who received the commandments from God, sometimes instructed the Israelite people to go to war against others. What the commandment is specifically referring to is what we would call murder, not all killing. Murder would be the intentional taking of an innocent human life from the moment of conception until natural death. And that requires intentionally taking an innocent human life. So for instance, if someone is defending themselves, if they get attacked by someone in our society, they have a right to defend themselves, and if unintentionally they take the person's life who is committing an aggression against them, they are not violating that commandment. Or if even they intentionally take the life in order to protect their life or the life of another person, and they do it simply for that reason, to protect their own life, and they have no other way to protect themselves, they are not violating that commandment. Now, with that being said, we should always do whatever we can to avoid the taking of any human life. We believe that human life is sacred. It's a gift given to us by God that shouldn't be treated in a cavalier manner. When it comes to the commandment as far as it pertains to soldiers in combat, first is that a soldier who kills a combatant during warfare is not violating that commandment. So there is no sin in what that soldier is doing. If there is an injustice committed by a soldier of some army where they take an innocent human life that is intentional, then they are violating that commandment. But I have to say, knowing soldiers, it is never easy or enjoyable or something sought after to harm another person. It goes against our nature. You know, human nature is good. We don't want to take life. We want to preserve life and defend life. And sometimes in order to do that, a soldier may have to take the life of someone who is trying to harm others.
Do you guys think it's okay to fight for your country?
I do believe in certain instances that it is okay to fight for your country, like when Japan attacked Pearl Harbor in World War II. After that, we joined the war to fight because they attacked us.
I think you have to think about this in a way as if we didn't have people in the military and them protecting us, we wouldn't have the peace of mind we have today of being safe in the U.S.
In the same way, like without a military, we're almost like sitting ducks waiting for someone else to come in and attack us. Having a military is almost like it makes other people not want to attack us because they know that there'll be a retaliation.
Yeah, so it's more of defense, though, instead of an offense, which I think a military is good for. I think that that's really important to have, why it's important to have a military.
I definitely think it's okay to join your country's military because that's something I respect a lot because they're fighting their lives like for us. Like they want to help their friends, their family, anybody they know. And that, like, I really look up to that because I don't know if I would have the courage to risk my own life for others.
In the Second Vatican Council's document, Gaudium et Spes, the Council states,
Those who are pledged to the service of their country as members of its armed forces should regard themselves as agents of security and freedom on behalf of their people.
As long as they fulfill this role properly, they are making a genuine contribution to the establishment of peace.
In modern times, the American offensives in Iraq and Afghanistan continue to stir debate about those conflicts being justified.
Our wildcard guest explains the different extremes that many soldiers experience when torn between their duty and their faith.
The war in Iraq in particular, the church didn't, John Paul II wouldn't call it a just war because he didn't believe it was a just war. But any member of the armed forces in the war in Iraq had to reconcile his own beliefs with what the church teaches in order to fight into it, in order to maintain good Catholic morality within himself.
Also, from the Second Vatican Council's document, Gaudium et Spes, we read that
all citizens and all governments are obliged to work for the avoidance of war.
However, as long as the danger of war persists and there is no international authority with the necessary competence and power,
Governments cannot be denied the right of lawful self-defense once all peace efforts have failed.
So there will always be a need for servicemen and women, even if it is just to keep peace and protect against the threat of war.
Finally, Father Al shares with us the honorable duty of serving your country and the important moral responsibilities that are entrusted to all service members.
Do so. In fact, we've had soldiers in military service from the very beginning of Christianity, from the time of John the Baptist and the time of Jesus. And there has never been a direct prohibition against military service in Christianity. So there's nothing that would stop a person from entering the military, especially if they're doing it for the honorable means of defending our country and defending other innocent persons throughout the world. Our faith in the life of a service person, I would say, is the same as the faith in the life of all of us, except a service person, especially those who are in war-torn areas or violent places and things like that, I think they can become more acutely aware of the need for spiritual guidance, for closeness with God in those moments. Sometimes those of us who live in non-violent situations can sometimes forget. But there is a deep hunger in all of us to know God, to love God, and to serve God as best we can in our own capacity, in our own particular vocations at that moment. So for people that are in the military, it's important to stay close to God, to know that our life can be taken from any one of us at any moment. An answer can be required of us from God. How have we lived our life? How have we dedicated ourselves to others and to loving Him? How have we kept His commandments? How have we lived in general? That's an answer that all of us will have to make, and those who are in harm's way on a continual basis are acutely aware of that possibility that their life may be required of them at any moment. So I would say it's important for servicemen and women to pray when they have chaplains around, to be able to receive the sacraments, to go to confession, to go to Mass, and when they don't have the chaplains with them, to read the Scripture, to pray the Rosary, to pray from their heart, to stay close to God, and to help to lead their fellow service people closer to God.
How can you guys work for peace and justice in your life today?
Well, I think just being educated can be a good tool. Just knowing what is a just war, what makes it a just war, good reasons to go into it, things like that are a good way to make yourself and others aware so that you don't repeat history.
I know, I didn't even know what it was going in today. Like when you're reading something and you see a word that you think you know, so you just continue reading and you're too lazy to look it up. That's how I felt about the just war. I'm like, yeah, it's just, I know.
Well, Che Guevara once said, "Let the world change you, and you can change the world." So basically, you can't change something unless you know about it.
Right, so be educated.
And I think the best way to really keep peace is to be peaceful yourself. You should be the change that you want to see.
Definitely going back to what both of you said, I think it's really important to be educated on this stuff because a lot of kids, they'll say something and they hold an opinion just because that's what they've seen others around them do. Mm-hmm. And this whole war culture that this generation is surrounded by, really affects some strong beliefs that are really important in your later life.
Not to sound cliche, but you could always pray too for humanity and that their morals stay pure and clean. Pope John Paul II said, war is not always inevitable, but it is always a defeat for humanity. So you can just pray that we don't come to war, right, that we never reach that point.
Definitely, and let's always remember to pray for those who are helping keep the peace for us, so our military and our armed forces and all those fighting for us.
Yeah. Unfortunately, we do not have a direct say in when war is declared and what kinds of military action should be taken up by our government.
However, we can make our beliefs known to our government leaders by writing them or taking part in peaceful public action to speak out against violence.
We also need to form and inform ourselves as active members of society and work for peace through the way that we interact with those around us.
We can volunteer our time and talents to send care packages to men and women serving abroad.
Perhaps we can show support to our wounded veterans and visit a VA hospital.
And at the very least, we should always be praying for peace.
So, how are you working toward peace in our world?
We'd love to hear from you.
Contact us at realfaithtv.com.
Or send us a tweet.
Finally, we leave you with this from the book of Numbers, chapter 6.
It was a blessing given to Moses from God to bless the Israelites.
The Lord bless you and keep you.
The Lord let his face shine upon you and be gracious to you.
The Lord look upon you kindly and give you peace.
Thanks for watching.
We'll see you next time on
Real Faith TV. Peace.
Listen to me. I am captain of the track team. And if I'm late,
She doesn't really think she's going to get out of here, does she?
Be nice. She's new.
Hello, is anyone there? Ugh!
Wow. Even from our standards, you look awful.
Oh, sweetie, what happened?
Me? My friend Becky got to talk to this super cute boy, and I tried to act like I wasn't jealous, but I so totally was. And then out of nowhere, this concrete barrier just popped up. Maybe it was a semi.
You mean you were driving?
Yeah. I mean, I know the whole eyes on the road thing, but this was a super important text. Maybe you have to know, Becky.
Texting? Great.
But it was only like 5 seconds, and I'm a really, really fast texter, so it wasn't even a big deal. Actually, has she texted me back yet? Wow, I get like no bars in this place. I wonder if they have Wi-Fi here.
That's low. That's low. That's low. Look, he's blushing.